Europe paid €357 million to build a bridge in Europe. A Chinese state company won the contract. And now, that bridge is cracking, and Beijing is the one holding the repair bill. In 2017, Croatia opened a public tender to build the Pelješac Bridge. 3 major companies bid for the contract, one from Austria, one from an Italian-Turkish consortium, and one backed by the Chinese government. The Chinese company China Road and Bridge Corporation, CRBC, submitted the cheapest bid, €279 million, excluding VAT. The Austrian giant Strabag came in at €351 million. That's a 20% gap on the overall price. Significant, but explainable. What wasn't explainable was what was hiding inside the numbers. One of the biggest costs in any bridge project is soil disposal, moving earth out of the way so the foundations can go in. Strabag priced that job at €1.9 million. CRBC priced the exact same job at €75,700. That's 96% cheaper. Same soil, same site, same job. How does any company do that for 96% less? CRBC has no pressure to make a profit. It is a division of a Chinese state-owned enterprise fully controlled by Beijing, which means it can price below cost, absorb the loss, and keep going because financial return was never the point. The return Beijing is looking for gets measured in geopolitical influence. This is the Belt and Road playbook. Since 2013, China has invested $1.175 trillion in infrastructure across more than 150 countries. Roads, ports, railways, bridges. The logic is straightforward. If China builds your infrastructure, China has leverage. Trade routes shift, dependencies form, and Beijing gains influence inside institutions, including, potentially, the European Union itself. What made Pelješac different is where it was. Not Africa and Southeast Asia, inside Europe borders, paid for with Europe taxpayer money. CRBC won legally. Europe procurement rules require accepting the lowest qualifying bid. Croatia followed the rules. The rules just weren't built for a state-backed company that wasn't playing the same game. Contract signed April 2018. Construction started July 2018. The Pelješac Bridge is 2.4 kilometers long. It rises 55 meters above the Adriatic Sea, taller than a 15-story building, completed on time and under budget during a global pandemic. But the engineering record that barely anyone talks about. The steel piles driven into the seabed to anchor this bridge reached 130.6 meters deep. That is a world record for driven steel piles in civil engineering. Picture it. 130 meters underground, roughly the height of a 40-story skyscraper, pointed straight down into the ocean floor. Engineers had to account for seismic activity, extreme currents, and soil conditions that changed dramatically from pile to pile. Each foundation was essentially its own engineering problem. To drive piles that deep, CRBC brought the world's largest pile-driving barge from China, a vessel the size of a small city block. It took 6 separate trips from China just to deliver all 150 steel piles to the site. The bridge used around 33,700 tons of structural steel. That's nearly 5 times the weight of the Eiffel Tower. Almost all of it was fabricated in Chinese factories and shipped to Croatia across the Indian Ocean, through the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean, then assembled with millimeter precision over open water. And here's one detail that never makes the news. The bridge crosses Marley-Stone Bay, a protected marine zone, home to Europe's most famous oyster farms. During pile driving, the shock waves from hammering steel into the seabed can kill fish and disrupt marine life for kilometers around. So CRBC deployed acoustic bubble curtains, systems that release millions of tiny air bubbles around the construction zone, forming a wall of foam that absorbs and scatters the sound before it can spread. And the bridge itself was engineered to keep traffic flowing even in Bora wind, gusts of up to 180 kilometers, with wind barriers running the full length of both sides of the deck. Environmental monitoring throughout construction found no significant damage to the protected marine ecosystem. The bridge opened July 26, 2022. Hundreds of thousands of cars crossed it in the first weeks. By any measure of what was actually built, it was extraordinary. But something else was happening underneath all of that. Something the ribbon-cutting ceremony didn't mention. Quick pause before we get to the part nobody talked about at the ribbon cutting. Videos like this one take dozens of hours to research, write, and produce. If you're enjoying it and want to help keep them coming, there's a link in the description and the pinned comment where you can make a small donation, completely optional, no pressure at all. Alright, back to the bridge. In October 2024, just 2 years after opening, engineers inspecting the Pelješac Bridge discovered surface cracks on several of the concrete pillars. Not catastrophic. Croatian Roads was quick to confirm the structure was stable and safe for traffic. But surface cracks on a 2-year-old bridge designed to last 100 years are the kind of thing that makes civil engineers pay very careful attention. Salt and moisture can enter through those cracks. Over 20 to 30 years, that quietly accelerates damage deep inside the reinforcement. What's a surface problem today becomes a structural problem tomorrow. Repairs are now scheduled for October 2026. And here's the part worth paying attention to. The bridge carries a 10-year warranty. CRBC is contractually obligated to carry out the repairs. So Beijing, the same Beijing that built the bridge, will be paying to fix it. But think about what that actually means. The Europe provided 357 million euros. Croatian taxpayers covered the rest. European money built a European bridge. And now, a Chinese state company holds the maintenance relationship, the engineering knowledge, design documentation, and the leverage if anything more serious ever needs to be fixed. This is the part of the Belt and Road model that never shows up in the headline cost. When a European firm builds your infrastructure and something goes wrong, the accountability chain stays within your legal system, your jurisdiction, your courts. When a state-owned foreign company builds it even with your own money, that chain gets complicated. Who decides what counts as a warranty defect? Who holds the original design files? Who do you call in 20 years when you need modifications? And the only people who fully understand the construction are sitting in an office in Beijing. The cheapest bid at the start can end up being the most expensive decision over a lifetime. That lesson, paid for by European taxpayers' governments across the continent, are now starting to absorb. And the timing could not be more critical, because Pelješac was no one-off. It was a proof of concept. Here is what the Pelješac Bridge proved to China's strategic planners. You don't need to negotiate with a country. You don't need government-to-government deals or diplomatic back channels. You just need to be cheaper than everyone else in a public tender. And if you're a state-backed company that doesn't need to turn a profit on the contract, you can be cheaper every single time. Since the bridge opened, European governments and the Europe itself have been scrambling to close the gap in their procurement laws. The European Commission pushed through an international procurement instrument, a tool designed to let the Europe block companies from countries that don't give European firms fair access to their own public tenders. China has blocked European firms from nearly every major government infrastructure tender at home for decades. But the instrument only passed in a limited form in 2022, and enforcement has been minimal. The window is still open. Right now, Chinese state companies are actively bidding on major infrastructure projects inside Europe. High-speed rail tenders, port expansions, renewable energy, data cable networks. Not in developing countries, not in the global south. In Poland, Greece, France, or Germany. The Pelješac Bridge was the moment China demonstrated that Belt and Road can operate inside the most tightly regulated economic bloc on Earth and win. So here's the question this series is going to chase down. Which projects are next? Which European governments are currently in negotiations where the lowest bidder happens to be backed by Beijing? And what does it mean for European sovereignty when the infrastructure holding your economy together was built, designed, and is still understood by someone else? Pelješac was just the beginning. The full map of what's already approved and what's currently in tender is more surprising than most people realize. We'll get into that next time. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely, these documentaries take a lot of time to research, verify, and put together properly. If this kind of content is something you value and want to help support, you can make a small donation through the first link in the description or the pinned comment. No pressure at all, but every contribution helps make the next one possible. And while you're here, if this kind of story interests you, the next one goes even bigger. A $7 billion tunnel being drilled under the sea to connect Europe directly to Africa. Who's funding it, who's fighting it, and why it might reshape one of the most strategic shipping routes on the planet. That video is on screen right now. Go watch it next.